and welcome to the second episode of our employment podcast. My name's Ashleigh Dibb, I'm a paralegal in the employment team, and I'm here alongside co-host and colleague Andrew Halpin, who is a partner in the employment team at Forbes. Today's podcast we're going to be focusing on all things employment tribunal, and we are joined by a very special guest, Lorraine Mensah, who is barrister and part-time employment judge. So today we are going to be looking at the employment tribunals from two perspectives, as Lorraine's practice as a barrister and also as a judge. But first off, we'll start with some easy questions. Lorraine, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of an introduction and how you've got to where you are today.
Well, first of all, nice to be here with everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Okay, so going back, I am a sibling of four. Attended a comprehensive school in Liverpool and went off to the Inns of Court School of Law in London to study my bar finals, and then didn't join a chambers but came back up to Liverpool and joined a firm of solicitors now known as Brodie's, Jackson and Cantor.
Yeah.
Joined them and was there for 5 years, did the qualified lawyers transfer test, and then had a seat in various departments, family law, immigration, employment and some mixed civil, and then was there until I joined India Buildings Chambers, which no longer exists, and then St John's Buildings, and then I've been a barrister in practice now since 2003, and my practice is mixed employment, immigration, some civil, so that's kind of me and my background.
Perfect. How long have you been doing the judge side?
Well, my first appointment was as an immigration judge, and that was in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit up in Yorkshire because for those that are judges, they'll know that you're not allowed to be in practice as a barrister in the same region that you are a judge. So I'm not in practice in immigration in Yorkshire. I was appointed into the Social Entitlement Chamber, which is the chamber that deals with things like personal independence payments and other forms of benefit in 2018. And then I was part of the 2021 intake for the Employment Tribunal, which was part of the drive, because of the backlog of cases, part of the drive to recruit more employment judges into the tribunal to try and help, which has started to help reduce that backlog. Yeah. So I was part of that intake.
Perfect.
Fantastic. And just in terms of your journey in respect of the barrister, if we can start with that. Obviously, you've given us a little bit of a background there with the cross qualification. How long have you been practicing as a barrister and various chambers and things?
Yeah, so I'd done the qualified lawyers transfer test. I couldn't get pupillage when I'd first qualified, as lots of people find. But I did manage to get a paralegal job in a law firm, and I was there for about 8 months and got on really well, loved the job, and the partner said to me, well, why don't you stay and cross transfer? So at that stage I thought, well, why not? Back at that stage, I know it's not the case now, but chambers didn't offer funding or guaranteed incomes if you were a pupil. So they take on 10 pupils, and by the end of the 12 months discard 9.
Wow.
and take on 1. So you might spend 12 months, for example, I got offered a pupillage in London around the same time. You could spend 12 months in London with no guarantee of income, having to pay for your travel and to be there and accommodation, and then not get a tenancy at the end. So there I was in Liverpool, loving the job, loving the partners, very busy, busy departments, and I thought, well, I think I'll stay. So I did, supported by the firm, and then ran an immigration department for about 3 years, and that department grew from myself and the then partner Andrew Holroyd, who in fact is a former president of the Law Society. So between ourselves and another senior staff member, a solicitor called Dipanka Chowdhury, we grew the department to probably 25 people from 3. I also, throughout that time, represented the department in the employment tribunal, along with Keith Robinson, who is retired recently from the Liverpool Employment Tribunal.
Yeah.
He was my partner in the employment team back then.
Wow, I never knew.
Yeah, and
great judge.
yeah, and great judge and a great partner as well.
Good.
He looked after me. In fact, I've got a little story there, so I'll tell you this story. We had a Law Society dinner, and the firm paid for all the staff to go to this event, and of course everybody had a few too many drinks. And so I don't remember how I got home, but I did. And then I'd been sensible enough to clear my diary out the next day, the morning of the next day.
Experience. That is experience.
I knew I couldn't see clients, for at least for the morning, so I cleared it out, and I was just going to deal with paperwork. There's always loads to do, so that was fine. So anyway, I remember jumping up in the morning, the alarm went off, I tried to get dressed. I realised when I was trying to put my pants on inside out that I was in no fit state to go to work. And got back into bed and just went straight back to sleep. And then I got a call from Keith at about 11:15. And very nicely, very politely, he said, "Are you thinking about coming into work at all today?" And I said, "What time is it?" And he said, "It's just after 11. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm coming in." Anyway, I did manage to get myself in. By 1 o'clock, I think Keith had found myself and several other staff members under the desks or asleep on the desks. No work, did nothing at all, useless. Couldn't even read, it was completely waste of time to go in, really. But anyway, he gathered us all up and he took us for an Italian meal.
Fantastic.
And then he sent us all home. And he said, "Start the day tomorrow." And that's the kind of partner he was. So you can see why I didn't want to go down to London at that stage and join that rat race, and not have anything potentially at the end of it. Mm-hmm. So I stayed with the firm, and then in 2003 I thought, I've got to do the bar thing. This is what I kind of originally planned to do.
Yeah.
So I joined India Buildings Chambers, which then was in India Buildings.
Remember.
And we worked together at that stage, and was involved quite heavily with employment law. Still ticking along with some immigration, but I think probably for a good 10, 15 years, employment was probably the key area of practice. And then we merged, as many chambers do, with many other chambers and became St John's Buildings. Then in 2015, I left with a number of other members of chambers and we created Complete Counsel. So I've been there since 15. I joined another chambers, a new chambers this year called Specialist Employment Chambers. So I'm doing both at the same time. Obviously with Complete Counsel, it's more northwest Yorkshire orientated for employment. This chambers is more South London, Watford, across that end of the country. So it bridges that gap between the north-south divide, and I'm able to do work in both regions, for all various regions. And I started to do some teaching last year at Manchester Met.
So you haven't got much on your plate then? No.
No, I've enjoyed the teaching. It's quite weird how life and fiction overlap. So last year and this year I taught the employment module to second year law students. And I think I was brought in, I know I was brought in as a practitioner to be able to talk to them about the module and how in real life the module, the law is applied. But I think sometimes students just think, it's not really, it's all theory and it doesn't really, translate to what you do as a lawyer. And I'm trying to tell them it really does. So part of the module was dealing with employee, self-employed worker identification. And I'm trying to take them through the various control, entrepreneurial, integration, multifactorial, the auto cleanse, Uber, going through all of that with them. And trying to get them to understand, look, in real life this does happen. And almost parallel, I'm then engrossed in a case with those issues.
Yeah.
I think most employment lawyers at one stage or another have to try and sit down and start to tackle identification. And unlike the students, fake role play scenario, in real life it's always more complicated.
Yeah.
There's always there's always so many factors, and trying to bring them all together is so difficult.
Almost impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to express to these students, listen, this is real.
Yeah.
Absorb it and understand it. And they're spoilt at the universities. They get access to all of the materials. They are telling them how spoiled they are. And you only realise that when you then are in practice. And you want to try and hit practical law and law, tell and Harveys, and you want access to all this, and someone in the firm says, do you know how much that cost?
Yeah.
And you go, really? Because it was all free at university.
Yeah. Best days.
Yeah.
Got access to
I
so
keep
much.
telling them, you're just so lucky, absorb it, but they're looking outside at the sunshine, and I remember those days still, so in the distant past. So I've been busy with lots of different things. Yeah. I like the variety. That's the kind of person I think I am. I like to do lots of different things to keep the interest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a terrible person I see something, I want to achieve it, I achieve it, and then I go, well, I've done that now. What else is there to do? And I want to go in there and do something else.
Yeah.
So, so I'm juggling all those things.
Good. And just jumping back to 2002, Stuart, head of chambers, he introduced me to my love of red wine. I remember,
Did he?
Yeah, he very kindly took us out one time, and that was good. But obviously a really good guy, and like you said about Keith Robinson, a really good leader, an inspiring individual. Yeah. What's as a barrister, what changes have you seen throughout the employment tribunal system, and then in terms of leadership with the various different chambers you've been involved in, the university, etc. What would you say about that?
How impressed I am about how committed everybody is.
Yeah.
And for the younger people that enter the profession, how tirelessly committed you have to be. I remember when I first joined Brodie's, Jackson and Cantor, the one of the partners in the firm said to me, the good old days, and we used to. One of the stories for Liverpool Crown Court was that there used to be a barrister who used to go in and take his dog into court. He was not an assistant's dog; he was just his best friend, and it was completely acceptable. Lunchtime, all of the barristers and judges would just go and partake in the appreciation of red wine and Italian pasta, and then carry on in the afternoon. And even when I joined that, I was like, well, that's impressive to be able to do that, because it's tough.
Yeah.
You're busy constantly. You're trying to deal with such a heavy workload within what seems like an impossible time frame. You do manage somehow to get through, but you do have to be committed. And I do feel now the pressures, certainly for people at the younger end of the profession, to meet deadlines and commitments with technology, because whilst technology has been fantastic in allowing us to do things more efficiently, that also means the expectation is you meet those deadlines far quicker than perhaps when I started out. Because when I started out, you'd say, well, it's gone off in the post. Hold off. And now it's instant. Yeah. Send it to, yes, I've got it. Well, I'll read it, and can you send it back to me in an hour?
So I bet you don't get the nice pink tape anymore, or do you
I crave that pink tape.
That had to be a skill when you were doing council instructions.
Yeah, but I remember at one stage, I was at home and I was trying to tidy up the office, and I had a bag just full of all that old ribbon. I miss that, and on some of the, I noticed some chambers have replicated that in digital form.
Okay.
So it looks like it's just an image of the ribbon.
I like it. Brings back good
Yeah,
memories.
yeah.
And obviously you'll have seen there's, a lot of change in employment. I've been involved in various means for 15 years, and we had the standard disciplinary and grievance procedures that got overhauled, the Equality Act, employment tribunal fees in and then out. What's your experiences of those changes, and any war stories? And
Well, one of the war stories as counsel, first of all, was when those fees came in. Was it 13?
I think so.
My claimant work just completely dropped off a cliff.
Right.
And completely understandably, a lot of solicitors' firms started to merge to protect themselves, to protect staff jobs. And that meant that, they were trying to share the respondent work with the staff that they had.
Yeah.
And that meant that, I had to try and find other work elsewhere, because what had traditionally just been farmed out to council was no longer available. So that was a huge shock. But I think in this profession, resilience is key. And you are always going to go through periods like that. It's going to happen. You may lose your job, or you may find that the what you thought you'd be able to achieve in the job hasn't been possible. Or you may have to leave and go elsewhere, and it may not feel like you're making progress. It may feel like you're either taking a step back or going sideways, and you just have to be resilient and push through. And so I've seen, that was a difficult time. And then, of course, fees were removed, and then there was this huge backlog. We're now in the phase of trying to deal with that backlog, and COVID kicks in.
Yeah.
And that just changes everything.
Yeah.
For years and years, there was talk across all of the various tribunal and court systems of digital. But it was in the long grass. It's costly. It was always going to happen, but it wasn't going to happen as quickly as it has. And that has been pushed through because of COVID. So, for example, in the social entitlement chamber, within a week of lockdown, I'd had training on Teams to enable hearings to go ahead.
Yeah.
Within that first year, I think I'd attended about, 15 online training courses on the cloud video platform, which is the CVP video that you access hearings. We'd all started Zoom as counsel, and then that fell out of favour. So then we were trying Teams and other ways of trying to have communication. And, different age groups, not always, but I think it's fair to say different age groups found that challenging in different ways. Some people have an aptitude for technology, others don't, and found it extremely difficult to adjust to this new technology. And so there was a lot of training needed to try and be able to access it all. And of course then for users, for the wider public, trying to access the system when we're going through. And like everything digital, any technology, when it's new, it's going to have its problems. And you're trying to iron them out whilst you're in the middle of trying to run, what are very busy areas of law and access to justice. And that is, that's, lots of stresses. I realised at the end of 2020, when because I'm fee paid, as fee paid and as counsel, was very aggrieved by the whole system and, had all my own personal concerns about things, that the stresses I'd been under were replicated right across through every level. Every judge at every level had been put under immense pressure, and the system under immense pressure, and everybody was trying really hard to cope with everything that was happening alongside just being a human being.
Well, I was about to say your life as well, with family and kids.
And the unknown.
Yeah.
And, the limitations on our liberty, what we could do and could not do, questioning, lawyers question everything.
Yeah.
So we have a natural way of questioning why, wanting to know the detail of why. So that doesn't help, particularly I'm not on TikTok, but if you
Are
If
you
want-
not?
No.
Oh, that's-
You know, judges are. We're not.
I wouldn't expect you to.
banned, but it's not a good
Frowned
idea.
upon.
It's not a good idea to be involved in social media, and as a judge, you're not. You should be out there expressing political or other
Yes.
opinions, and the members of the public wouldn't expect it.
No.
No.
They expect you to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I wasn't on TikTok, but obviously friends were, and I got sent constant videos from scientists all over the world who said, "Don't take the vaccine," and all of those things. There was all that craziness
Yeah.
going on through 2020 and into 21, and not knowing what on it. In the end, my rationale for when I took the vaccine is I thought, well, all the medical professionals around the world are having to have this vaccine.
Yeah.
What would the world be like without doctors and nurses? And I thought, it's not a world I want to be
No.
in.
No.
So I thought, if they're going to have it, then I'll go down with them.
Okay, yeah. Take the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Good. And tell me as well, really interesting. Are you old school and you're still pen and paper,
No.
or are you all online now?
All online.
Wow. How did
In
you find
fact,
that transition?
Well, as counsel, it's been really useful. This is where being a fee-paid judge and a barrister at the same time has been really helpful. Because I've had all that training, because you
Yeah.
had to have it as a judge. Then that helped me. For example, PDF Exchange Editor. What a dream that is.
Wow.
Why didn't I have that before?
Do you know what that is,
Yeah,
actually?
I've got one.
Oh, well, there we are then.
Oh, no.
See, I'm a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur.
So let me tell you, PDF Exchange Editor. So you get your digital bundle. It may already be bookmarked. So forget your traditional index.
Yeah.
Useless. This is your bookmark index. So this allows you to click on the bookmark that might say response, and it goes straight to that
Right.
on the 2,000 page digital bundle. You don't have to go to the index, scroll down, find out where it is, go to the page. Just click and it goes straight to the page. You can then create your own bookmarks. So as you're reading through the papers, you start to bookmark. Not only you can bookmark, but you can outline, you can put commentary. So for example, in a case I did recently as counsel, I was able to put a red square around everything that was relevant. I was able to put commentary where I put all the questions that I wanted to ask on all the various on each of the various aspects of the bundle. It was fully bookmarked so that I could jump. Somebody would say, "Where's such and such?" I'd go, "Ding, internal page 1464, electronic page."
Wow.
So that has been absolutely, just for me, absolutely fantastic. It's changed my life.
So if I'm going to invest for shares in highlighters and sticky notes, you'd say no. No, fine. I'll scrap that then.
And also, I mean, one of the teething problems with the new my HMCTS, the new portal platform, is where you want to upload things and you've taken like a photograph, because one of the problems with the PDF documents is some of them may be capable of being copied and some of them may not, and they may be images.
Okay.
And some of them you can convert and some of them you can't. And one of the things that you want to do when you start to get to grips with the technology is you want to be able to go into a document and snapshot something out of it and put it into the document that you create, because it saves a lot of time. You don't want to type it out.
No.
You just want to place it in the document. And I've got used to doing that now, but the portal doesn't necessarily like it. So it can create gaps in documents if you don't set it up, or when it's uploaded it can convert and change. That's all new.
Yeah.
That's going to have to be resolved over time. But it means I can create skeleton arguments out of evidence without having to, as counsel, I could have a 2,000 page document. I will hardly have to type anything at all, because I'll just start to copy or snapshot things into my skeleton argument.
So it's a real time saver.
It saves so much time.
Right.
So you've touched on obviously the various roles you've had. Just for people looking to start a legal career who are maybe choosing whether to go down the solicitor route or the barrister route, do you have any tips for us?
I can talk from my personal experience, and I found having been a solicitor first extremely useful when I became a barrister. It's a bit like when I became a judge, it was useful that I'd been in practice in the area before I became a judge, because you get then to see all the different parts of the job. And I suppose it's a bit old school in that way, because it's a bit like when there's an owner of a factory and he wants his son to take over the factory, but he makes him work in every part of the factory first. And that's how I feel if you've been in practice, and certainly for me as a solicitor, you get to see the client relationship in a way that I don't think the bar has that, unless maybe some direct access. You get to deal with the everyday financial difficulties, evidence gathering problems, restraints of time, and the various tasks that you have to undertake as a solicitor that won't necessarily always be appreciated if you've just gone straight in as counsel. And that, well, I'm told by the solicitors that instruct me that that's very helpful. They find that helpful because then I feel I can be quite practical. So I'll go, look, ideally, because this is what counsel always want, the ideal. Ideally, I would like you to have A, B and C. Understanding the difficulties, C and D will probably just about get us through.
Yeah.
Can we manage that? And if we can't manage C and D, is there a way for C to be found, dealt with or addressed differently? That I think is so. In terms of that career progression, it doesn't actually matter which way round you go.
No.
Because you can swap between the two professions, and so I enjoyed it being that way round. But when you're first starting out, it's also this thing about what area of law. I would say don't be too hung up on the area of law from when you first start. You don't know. Everyone in the interview expects you to go, well, of course I want to join this chambers and I want to join this firm because that's all I've wanted since I was 2. When we all know the reality is that's not true. And you need to experience as wide a range of topics as possible so that you can find out what you like and what you don't like. I did a bit of family law when I was at the firm, and I realised that it wasn't for me. I started to deal with children and people, and I thought, arguing about things, and I thought, no, this is not.
Bit too personal.
Yeah, it's not what I want to do, and so
And just in terms of going down the judge route, what kind of encouraged you to take that step?
What did encourage me to take that step? As counsel and solicitor, if you're the advocate in a case, and even if you're not an advocate, to be fair, if you really feel strongly about that case, you really feel that this person deserves to win their case, there's nothing more frustrating when you look at the judge or the panel and you're not sure they've seen the case in the same way. And or your client has given you a heartfelt account of events and then gone in and been a completely different person as a witness. And or been an amazing witness, sat confidently in a private room and being awful in front of the panel or judge. And you're so frustrated by it. And as the judge, you can sit there and see all this drama unfold. But we all feel, that you're going to make the best decision in the case. So it doesn't matter if the client your client messes up, because I go, well, okay, yeah, I can see that. I know what they've said, but I understand why it's been said, and I'm not going to take that against them. And then you've got counsel, as the judge, you've got counsel saying, look, this, and trying to rationalise what's happened. And you can kind of go, I understand that. Yeah. Don't panic. It hasn't completely destroyed your case.
Yet.
So it is a privilege to be a judge. It really is a privilege, because you do, you want to achieve the best result, the right result. you have that opportunity to deliver justice in a way that there are good and bad in everything. There were good and bad judges, there were good and bad barristers, good and bad solicitors, and there were good and bad clients. Mm-hmm. So it gives you that opportunity to go, well, I'm going to make sure in this case that I try to deliver access and justice and fairness, even whatever the decision might be, so that hopefully, you can't please all the people all the time, but hopefully most people will walk away and say, well, even if I didn't get the result that I wanted, the judge was fair.
Yeah.
I think that's what most people want.
Yeah, absolutely.
What surprised you most? Is there anything that really surprised you, the judge?
Yes, seeing my profession, because you don't get to see how your colleagues perform. As a barrister, unless you are in a case with multiple barristers, you don't often get to see how other barristers perform. And what shocked me is actually seeing the performance of other barristers and other lawyers and people that you might have seen in corridors for years, and then they appear in front of you as counsel or solicitor, and how varied that can be.
Wow.
You can't go on appearance. Someone may seem very professional and they understand the law, and then you see them as an advocate and you just go, okay, that's not the case.
Wow.
Sometimes you recognise it's because it's not an area that they are comfortable with. Mm-hmm. They've had to step in for somebody else and it's not something they do, and you understand that. But there were others who were there consistently and performing the same way, good or bad. Mm. So that's interesting to see, yeah.
Is there anything in particular you've done badly quite often? Or anything you see that's done well?
In terms of well, I have to say, somebody that is properly prepared, skeleton argument or opening speech, good written submissions, questions are clearly prepared on the relevant material, issues in the case which have been clearly identified, identification of issues. How wrong can that go? Good identification of issues and good preparation. Good preparation has got to be the key. And then you can forgive almost everything else, because that's the nature of the beast. Things go wrong or right during the course of hearings. But if you see somebody has put in good preparation, then you can deal with everything else. In terms of bad, the digital system has brought lots of bad behaviours to the fore. So and this is particularly litigants in person, and I think being at home often doesn't assist. And solicitors need to get to grips with training their clients to deal with attending hearings by video. Yeah. This isn't about coaching, this isn't about the evidence, this is about taking them through how they manage that process. If they're not going to do it from the solicitor's office, how they manage it from home. And there's good and bad. I've had litigants in person attend. I had one guy attend, and I thought he was in a chalet. He was in a shed in the garden of a friend's house because they had internet. And he was trying to access the hearing by the internet from the shed. I had another guy in a taxi. The taxi driver was still there in the taxi with him. He's in the back. I've had one where it was a couple and they started to have full-blown fight in the middle of the hearing, and because the lady had accessed the hearing by a phone, she took the phone around the whole house as they argued. So we got to see every room in the house. We got to hear the whole argument, the whole relationship argued out, right to the front door.
That's how she kicked him out.
Yeah. So, and that is one of the difficult features of video hearings, is from the judge's perspective trying to manage it, but from the solicitors and the barrister's perspective, making sure the client understands this is a formal process. You are deemed to be virtually in that tribunal room. You are expected to behave as you would in a tribunal room. And you are expected to abide by the same etiquette in terms of conversation, you know, not talking over people, listening when you're spoken to. You're expected to deal with it in the same respectful way and use a language that you would use in that kind of environment. But people forget because they're at home, they've got a cup of tea. You know, sometimes you don't know what they're drinking. And that can be difficult to manage.
And do you think, because what, probably naively, first employment tribunal I attended, obviously there's formality, but it is, as court processes go, relatively informal.
Yeah.
I'd probably watch too much, American crime dramas and expecting shouting and raving. But do you feel that sometimes, and mainly claimants in person or litigants in person or even respondents who represent themselves, build it up so much and build them up that they're almost there waiting for a confrontation?
It's personal, isn't it? Yeah, it's personal. We know as lawyers that lay people end up in tribunals because they want their day.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I'm talking about litigants in person, so respondents or claimants. They want the day. They feel that they haven't done anything wrong or something has gone wrong to them personally. And they can't detach the fact that this is a legal environment from that personal issues that they have. And so they don't go prepared. So many litigants in person are completely unprepared. They don't really understand. It constantly surprises me how a judge could have taken litigants in person through a 2-hour case management hearing, gone through all of the issues, set out in writing what they need to do in terms of timetabling for the hearing, and then they get to the hearing. There are no witness statements. There isn't even an agreed bundle. You're lucky if you have a bundle. There's definitely no page numbers. There is a half-written, handwritten index. But you're still trying to deliver that justice.
Yeah. And does that happen more regularly than you expect?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it does. Unfortunately, it does. And it's a frustration for the litigants because when they realise that they have to cross-examine, and they don't really know what cross-examination is.
No.
And instead what they do is make statements. Constantly just make statements. They don't ask questions. And, you're trying to get them through, but as a judge you can't step into the arena. You're always very grateful if there's a representative on one side or the other, because actually you do rely upon that representative as an officer of the court to try and assist the process, because everybody's trying to get to the end of it in a manner that is reasonable.
Yeah.
And gets the evidence out to allow for a decision to be made. And it's not in anyone's interest to drag things out unnecessarily or be extremely difficult because the litigant in person doesn't understand what their role is.
Yeah.
But it makes things, when I see, as counsel, I'm delighted that there's representative on the other side. It makes things so much easier.
Yeah.
You can, you know what you need to do. You know the job in hand. A litigant in person, you know how difficult it is.
Well, as you say, because it's very personal and they've been dismissed. That's all they're thinking about.
Yeah. And it might be theft.
Yeah. And
It might be a serious allegation.
Yeah. Well, I find it is bad. It's a slam dunk. But when you see them in the witness box, they thoroughly believe. They've managed to convince themselves that, well, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
As you say, no, you've stolen £10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. But I wasn't paid well for 20 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the things in terms of, what I find the most acrimonious, this family business scenario.
Oh, yes.
Either husband and wife, or it is a family business, and it's usually every sibling and their partners, the extended family members, and everything is amazing when everyone gets on, and then something happens. There's a divorce, or there's a breakdown in the relationship, and they are so acrimonious.
Mm-hmm.
They are very difficult. the most challenging, I think, of all cases to actually deal with, because there isn't one person who's aggrieved. Everyone is aggrieved. Every single person giving evidence is aggrieved because they're all related. And they're very as a judge or as an advocate, they're extremely challenging. And I do see a trend. I find that, and I think there's a reason for this. Solicitors tend to absorb more of the persona of their clients in as advocates, and I think that's because they've dealt with them for so long.
Yeah.
They've had all of the conversations. They've gone through all the evidence in detail. They know their client. They know the stresses and the strains of all the externals of the case. And it's very difficult to then distance yourself from all of that. And it comes out in your manner and tone when you're the advocate. Whereas if you're able to, I think sometimes it does help when you've got those kind of family situations to be able to either hand it to counsel or a colleague and say, you're the advocate on this case, because I've been dealing with it for 3 years, and I don't want that to come out in the hearing.
Yeah.
And as a judge, you do see that. You see it come out, and also it's extremely difficult because, for example, where there has been that breakdown in relationship between family members, they want you to put the case in a way that is not necessarily the best way for their case, because they want to see the other person have to answer certain questions, but they may not necessarily be relevant or material, and you've got to try and navigate that. And I think it's easier to navigate it when you can say, well, Ashleigh, I'm going to have you now go and do the advocacy.
Yeah. Well, I've had that where you're cross-examining and you get the tap on the shoulder and a note comes over.
Yeah, the note.
It's not relevant, so you can't read it, and you can see the judge looking at you.
And with digital now, it's not a note; it's now a message in the chat, in some chat function on Teams or something, constantly coming up messages.
Yeah.
And you're trying to deal with that and digital and the judge and 3 screens and.
I can imagine it's amusing for a judge sometimes looking down and seeing that everyone getting ruffled.
It's actually very difficult you try and constantly to take your note, observe, look at the evidence that the witness is being referred to or you're being referred to, and watch everybody involved in the hearing. What are they doing? Because you're managing now multiple environments, the environment you're in and all of the environments that everybody else is in. One may be in an office, one may be at home, there may be children somewhere in the property, somebody else may be at home and have the wife working from home, so you've got, or animals feature more often than, I've seen so many animals in these hearings now. Cats, dogs, parrots, it's so difficult as a judge to manage all of that. You don't necessarily see everything as you would if it was in the tribunal hearing, because you have all your senses to pick up, and you can't necessarily do that in the same way.
Just in terms of the judge role, can you just give us a typical day in the life?
Okay, so as a fee-paid judge, you only receive the papers for the hearing that you're about to start the next day, either the evening before or the morning. You don't receive them in advance. So different judges have different approaches. As I was, certainly for the employment tribunal, I was appointed in 2021. I'm very keen to want to read everything. I can't help it because I want to make sure that I'm on top of things. And you feel that weight of responsibility as a judge because you have to be on top of everyone's role and every issue to make sure that you can fairly guide people through the process. So you're trying to, there's a lot of reading, you have to be good at reading and reading at speed and knowing what to read in terms of what are the issues in the case, because really what you want to do is know what the issues are, do any research that you might need in terms of the law. That's really what you're concerned about as the judge. What's the law saying about this? Procedural points. What's the procedural law issue? You don't necessarily know if you've got even any advocates involved, so if they're going to be litigants in person, you need to be able to give them some guide about what you're asking them to deal with. So there's a lot of preparation before you start. And then obviously, because I'm now PDF Exchange editor and I love the whole bookmarking thing, I'm trying to bookmark everything furiously before I start the hearing. You can get anything, so depending on how many days you're booked for, you can get a panel hearing by video for however many days. You can get case management, you can get preliminary hearings, they can be face to face, they can be video. So I might not know until the day before, I have to be somewhere. Yeah. Or whether I'm at home and on video, or whether it's by telephone. So you don't find out that until very late in the day before, and then you've just got to make plans and make sure that you...
So you don't necessarily have to be in the tribunal building?
In fact, since lockdown, I've only been in the tribunal that is within my jurisdiction once.
Wow.
I've had many hearings, all of them by video.
Right.
Other than telephone case management, all of them by video.
I was always under the assumption that you were in the tribunal building. I'm not sure why.
No, at home. What we all did also during lockdown, of course, is we kind of updated our home environment office.
Yes.
To blank out any personal stuff at the back. The funny kind of start-off scenarios when people didn't quite realise how widescreen that camera is. So sometimes you'd see people and they'd put, right at the early days, they might have put a large blanket or something. But the blanket's not big enough to cover how widescreen that camera is. And there behind is their whole home and all sorts of personal things going on in the background. So making sure that you've got a nice neutral background to work with, and that you don't get, there's no interference. When you're at home, unfortunately, I don't know why it is, but the delivery man always... He doesn't want to leave the parcel this time. He's left the parcel 100 times before, but this time he wants a signature.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with something by telephone, case management. He's knocking on the window, he won't leave me. And I'm going, I've got 2 advocates trying to talk to me about the issues in a case, and I've got the delivery guy knocking on the window. I ended up opening the window.
What was it he was delivering? What was it? Was it important?
No. Some stupid thing from Amazon. Go away. Very rude.
Yes.
But unfortunately he didn't, pointing to my ears. So there are challenges, but all 99% has been from home.
Yeah, I was interested, and then we touched on it as your barrister point with PDF, and now seeing about AI. It seems to be, you can't go anywhere without hearing about AI. Tribunals.
We're all going to lose our jobs, apparently.
Yeah, robots. And we know, as you say, the tribunals have fast forward massively in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of hearings. Do you think we'll get to a stage where there'll be no in-person hearings? Do you think that's something that could be likely?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, you've got to remember, if we go back to criminal courts, and that was never my jurisdiction, but the criminal courts originally set up special measures to allow vulnerable people to give evidence. And those special measures were video evidence, or screens, or all of those things so that people could participate in the hearings. And we know in employment, we've got the presidential guidance, the bench book, all about how you make adjustments for vulnerable people. It's something we have to do in our job all the time. And the categories now that we recognise as vulnerable people is far wider in scope than anything we did in the past. And so that was an elevated way of creating a level playing field. Now, when the whole COVID thing first kicked in, I remember a lot of barristers were very upset, saying it's not access to justice. People need to be in the room, they need to be with the judge. And some of them got very upset when they'd turn up at the hearing they'd turn up with their client and the judge was by video.
Fantastic.
But over time, attitudes have changed.
Yeah.
And I suppose it depends upon the topic and the individual. Now, I know that there are many judges who have a view right up to the top that, you know, we need to have the face-to-face, we need to retain the face-to-face. I suspect the younger you are,
Yes.
the more amenable you are to digital.
Yeah.
And, you know, we know that from school-age kids now, the idea of face-to-face communication is, it's deteriorated.
I think it's sad. I think it is the way it's going. But, you know, I've had to change my advocacy style to cross-examine because in a tribunal it is more formal. I just think automatically it's more formal, and I find that when you're at home, and I've seen it, I can see a witness who's there, I can see he's looking over there because he's not involved.
Yes.
And it loses that
Yeah.
importance, if you like. But I think you've got to change the way you prep people, the way you cross-examine, because they will be a bit more direct, I find, claimants especially. They feel that they're at home, they're in a safe environment. So that's...
I mean, it might be that in the future, just an idea might be that we have places where you can go to give your evidence, not you know, by video. So you're not necessarily at home. So it might not be the traditional tribunal setup. It might be it's still all virtual, but you can, if you don't have an appropriate environment to give evidence from or to participate, a bit like workspaces now, that you can just rent a workspace, that you can go and use a space to access a hearing in that way. Because I think that's one of the problems with not just lay people, even professionals.
Oh yeah.
You know, internet access. Well, many barristers even with internet access, and they're dropping in and out every 5 minutes, and it's because there's 4 kids at home trying to use the internet for school and videos and all of the rest of it, and you know, they haven't listened when mum or dad has said, I'm now in work, don't use the internet.
Yeah. Well, mine were 6 and 3 or 4 in lockdown, and 3 or 4 year olds used to bob up, and I was over there under the table putting a doll's head on or putting a dress on and all sorts, really.
Exactly.
And you thought, if people could see what I was actually doing behind this.
That's right. Difficult.
So in terms of hints and tips that you can provide to solicitors or barristers, what can they do to make a judge's life easier?
First things first, please make sure the bundle is indexed in chronological order and does not contain duplicates. I know that, you know, particularly in employment, you know, multiple documents, the same documents, may be attached to a letter many, many times. The procedure may have been sent to someone many, many times. You don't have to keep putting it in as an attachment behind that letter so that I end up with 18 copies of the company's disciplinary policy because it was sent to different people as an attachment, either by email or by letter.
Is that a regular occurrence?
Yes.
Wow.
And duplicates, please check the bundle. Read it. Make sure you don't disclose privileged documents. It still happens.
Yeah.
Make sure the bundle contains material that is relevant. How many times do you get to the end of a hearing and at least a quarter of those documents have not been referred to? Try to scope out really if the document needs to be there. I know it's not always possible. If you have lawyers on one side and a litigant in person on the other, they're not going to understand why you're asking them to leave something out. So it's not possible. You can have 2 bundles. So you can have your main bundle in chronological order with all the key documents, and you might have, for example, a policy bundle with just the policy documents in. And that means that you can reduce the weight of this bundle that you're trying to manage. So bundle preparation is so important. In terms of the issues, this is extremely difficult because the person that attends the case management hearing is as important as the person that deals with the final hearing. Identifying the issues at that case management hearing can be a hostage to fortune later on in the substantive hearing. If you have not identified something, then the person on the other side is quite within their rights to go, hold on a second, this isn't in the list of issues. We haven't prepared for this. We haven't adduced evidence about it. We're prejudiced now. And even though you might say to the judge, you're not bound by the list of issues, you must deal with everything that's relevant and there's case law about it, you still don't want to put yourself in that position. I do see individuals go to case management hearings unprepared, lawyers unprepared. They don't have instructions from their client when it comes to narrowing the issues. What are you there for if not to help narrow the issues of the case management?
Yeah.
They don't have basic information like availability of witnesses. The point of a case management hearing is usually to try and timetable the matter to a hearing. The judge would like to give you a date or fix a date then, because as we know, if you don't fix a date then, it's going to be thrown into the long grass, so you want to try and get a date fixed. And also it helps focus everybody on what needs to be achieved. So go with availability of witnesses. Check if witnesses have any adjustments. It can be dealt with later, but it is good to know from the outset, because you might have listed it for a face-to-face, but you might have key witnesses who are not able to attend face-to-face, and then you're asking for a hybrid. Or it might be that it means that the hearing that's been allocated is completely inappropriate for the case. So, that case management agenda, yes, that's helping you to try and answer various questions, but think more widely about what's going to be timetabled, what evidence you're going to require. The best prepared are those that have thought about the case right to the last, right to the end, right to the final hearing. They already know what the issues are in that final hearing, what evidence is going to be required, who they're going to call as witnesses. And I know it's a frustration for solicitors, because sometimes they're instructed late, sometimes the clients aren't particularly helpful or forthcoming with the information and the evidence that you need from the outset. Sometimes evidence comes in dribs and drabs along the way. But do your best to get as much information as you can for that case management, because I don't know how many times at that final hearing you're looking at the list of issues as a judge or as counsel, and you go, if only that had said this, that might have been different. The outcome might have been different.
Yeah.
So, so that's really important. And then in terms of as I've already said, preparing the witnesses for what's expected of them on the day, even giving them the opportunity, if it's going to be face-to-face, to go and see the environment so they can get used to it. For vulnerable witnesses, make sure you have early on identified what needs they have, because that can be very complicated. I've dealt with one myself as counsel recently with somebody who had very complicated mental health difficulties. It was not only did we have to come up with lots of ways of providing adjustments for best evidence, but we had to, with the tribunal, work with the tribunal through the hearing to make adjustments as we went along to adapt to what was happening to that person. So have all that in mind, and then good arguments, written arguments, skeleton arguments, opening. So all of those things are always helpful. That's the ideal, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the ideal.
And what about cross-examination? What really frustrates you in cross-examination with advocates?
Aggression.
Right.
That is unnecessary.
Yeah.
And inappropriate, and it doesn't even matter if the witness is aggressive. I don't expect to see advocates, be it professionals, being aggressive. Asking stupid questions that really don't take the case anywhere, that are not even material, and that you're not going to get the answer. I've never had a case yet where somebody says, this theft, well, you stole these items. Your employer believes you stole these items. In fact, it's even worse. Some of them say, you stole these items. And you're like, well, hold on, that's not what we're dealing with. Yeah. But, your employer believes you stole these items, and you did, didn't you? You did, didn't you? That usual phrase. Please stop that. You did, didn't you? Or wasn't it? It just doesn't help. You know, think about what are you trying to achieve. You want information from that person. You should already have an idea of what information they're going to give you, and you should already know that whether the answer to the question is consistent with what's in the documents. Because good cross-examination will give the person an opportunity to give their evidence, and then if your aim is to show that they're not a reliable witness, to be able to take them to a document to show the inconsistencies between the two, and that's your job done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you do enough of that, then when you come to the end, you say, well, they're not reliable, look at all of this. So you didn't need to go through, didn't you? And you don't need to do all of that because it just doesn't achieve what you want. So I've seen, as a judge, you do get to see some fantastic cross-examination. And when you have an advocate that is really good in cross-examination, you know, it just, you can't help but be impressed. It does help.
Yeah, well, I was brought up on a diet of Steve Peacock at Waitlands, who was, hi Steve, if you're listening, a fantastic advocate. But when I was at the university, James Boyd, KC, he was fantastic, and the claimant was interesting character. But I was interested in that one. He made a couple of comments, and he even said privately, you know, I was just testing the water, and the judge didn't scathe him, so it was good. Have you ever come across some quite good quips that you've seen that's been
yes, but I
amusing?
I don't necessarily. There are some lawyers, some advocates that are really, they're so talented, and they have a way of phrasing things that I just don't have that capability. I admit, as a barrister myself, sometimes if you sat behind a silk or you watch a silk and you see why they've become silk. You hear them, the way they phrase things, and it's like a war of brains, isn't it? So you'll hear them say something, and the judge will say something, and you'll go, okay, what did that mean? And you have to take a few more minutes to try and work out what was said, why it was said, and they've just got better brains. Just some people are just fantastic at the jobs, and we all can't be those people. You know, you have to recognise what abilities you have and play to your strengths. But then also, because some people are so brilliant, they're able to get away with saying things that you just never dream of saying, you know. And they're able to make jokes. I've realised, and my partner will say this is absolute gospel truth. I am hopeless at jokes. I can't retain a joke. I have no ability to retain any joke. And if I try to repeat a joke that I've heard, I always get it wrong. I'll give the punchline first, and then I've ruined the joke. And so I've realised now that is not for me. Stay away from that. That's a dangerous thing to do. But the really, really talented advocates are able to weave humour into their submissions. And it's amazing.
And it is great to watch. Yeah, I have come away from some hearings and just gone, wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a little boy in a sweet shop
Yeah.
sometimes.
It also, you know, when you watch somebody who's an absolute fantastic advocate, and a straightforward sentence just comes out in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's almost, it reminds me a bit of cryptic crosswords. So if you know the formula for a cryptic crossword, you can pretty much get on and complete the crossword. If you don't know the formula, it's mud.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's an evolving talent. It's something that you develop over time.
Great.
And also it comes with being able to relax in that environment, because it becomes familiar. And obviously in this profession, people get to know each other, and so you get to see all of the different skill sets that people have, and you do mimic them. If you see something really good, then you do try to take it on board and reproduce that yourself, both as a judge and as an advocate.
Fantastic.
And just in your personal experiences, maybe since you started out in the profession till today, is there any particular development you've seen in the cases you deal with? Anything that's different now?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly in terms of discrimination law, I've seen there has been significant change. Even from the point, I mean, I was in practice prior to the Equality Act. So I was dealing with the old Disability Discrimination Act, the Race Relations Act, the Sex Discrimination Act. Then came the Equality Act. And back in the beginning, they were very basic, obvious cases of either disability discrimination or race discrimination. They are more complicated now because we have pregnancy and maternity, we have because we have such our knowledge base of disability has improved. So the scope of those people that fit within those definitions is wider now than it was before. The law has evolved, not as quickly as some people would like, but it has evolved to recognise the rights in terms of that Equality Act of a wider groups of people than before. But unfortunately, what I have seen since COVID, I've seen a deterioration in terms of respondents in compliance. And I've seen reference to COVID and the needs of the business being expressed as taking priority on the basis that there's some belief that the tribunal will go along with that as a basis to discriminate. So I've been quite surprised how many businesses we're not talking about your Section 98 for small business and substantial equity of the merits of the case and equity. We're not talking about those businesses. Even big businesses with thousands and thousands of members of staff who have lots of procedures in place senior managers are not complying with those procedures. And they're saying, well, I was trying to run a business, COVID, economics. They had to take priority. So yes, lots of progress. Yes, a lot more complicated, protecting more people. But I think there's been some backward steps since COVID.
Yeah. That running the business defence hasn't hit the statute book yet.
No.
No. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there. But that was fantastic. I feel like there might be a part 2 to this.
Talk all day.
So much we can discuss. But thank you for your time.
You're
and
welcome.
Hopefully for those listening and watching, realise that judges are real people. Yeah, as are barristers, then they're not all scary. But honestly, that was really enlightening. And
it wouldn't be the same if you appeared before me.
Yeah.